We have nothing to fear but fear itself. And an alligator with a shotgun. Hey there, kiddos, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, hoping that you are having a great day. And in today's video, I'd like to sit back, relax, and have a conversation with all of you guys about video games, the video game industry, and more specifically, a particular subset of video games. You see, I've got a question for you guys. What does Final Fantasy VII, Demon's Souls, Destroy All Humans, and Resident Evil 4 have in common? Figured it out? No? Well, I'll tell you. All four of these games are phenomenal in their own right, and all four of these games have received remakes in recent years, bringing them into the modern age on modern consoles with, in some cases, minor graphical improvements, and in other cases, complete gameplay overhauls. Basically taking successful games of the past and turning them into successful games of the present. And remakes, remasters, re-releases, these are not new concepts in the video game ecosystem. I mean, the first Resident Evil game came out for the PlayStation, and just a few years later, it was remade basically whole cloth for the Nintendo GameCube, giving us, in my opinion, the definitive version of Resident Evil 1 now that I think about it. But you see, in today's video, what I would like to do is make an earnest plea to all gaming companies out there making remasters, remakes, re-releases of their classic titles, especially the ones who are primarily focused on remaking the best games in their catalog. And my plea to them is this: the good games of the past do not need to be remade. At the very least, they aren't the games that I think a lot of these companies should be focusing on remaking. You see, a good game is good for basically forever, right? If you take a good game and just modernize it a bit, fine. All well and good. There have been bad remakes, there have been subpar remakes, I understand. But for the most part, when a company is taking a good game from the past and remaking it, they are taking a safe bet that what they're putting out there is going to be received, hopefully, as well as the original release. This is especially true for titles like Final Fantasy VII, Resident Evil 4, where the original game was just so popular that obviously an updated re-release is going to have good reception. But there's a particular category of games that I feel is being left in the dust, and that is games that did not have good initial reception. Games that, in fact, had really bad, really negative initial reception. Games that are hated, but in some way, shape, or form, had a lot of promise to them. Maybe they were okay games. Maybe they had one or two story or gameplay mechanics about them that made them worth checking out. And these are video games that I personally feel a lot of these game devs, a lot of these game developers should go back and re-examine and say, hey, is there promise here? Is this a cult classic to someone? Is this a game that has a good reception, just poor sales? Is this a game that, for some reason or another, failed, even though it's not all that bad? Now, let me give you a great example of this, okay? This is Samus Returns. It is a 3DS remake, whole cloth, brand new engine, brand new mechanics, fights, etc., of Metroid 2 for the Game Boy, which is a very old game, I know. And the 3DS is a fairly old console now that I think about it. I don't know if do they still make 3DS games now that I actually don't know the answer to that one. Let me know in the comment section below. But Samus Returns took Metroid 2, which, okay game, solid plot, a bit constrained by the console it was on, and does not have the cult following I think that some of the other Metroid titles do, and turned it into what is, in my opinion, one of the best entries in the Metroid series, period. That's quite the accomplishment, in my opinion. Taking something that didn't necessarily have an amazing reception and turning it into one of the best games in the franchise, that's pretty good. And I think there's a whole ecosystem worth of video games from the past that maybe don't deserve a remake because they got poor reception or they didn't sell well or they got critically panned or whatever. But there's plenty of video games out there that I think have promise that are worth reevaluating and considering remastering, even when they themselves don't have, again, the best reception. You know, the Resident Evil 1 remake is considered by me and many others to be the definitive way to play Resident Evil 1. The Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake are considered to be pretty solid games. I'm not a huge fan of the third one myself, but that is what it is. And the Resident Evil 4 remake is amazing. It does to the remake series what 4 did to the original series. It's the best game ever made forever, ever. And that's all well and good, but there are other Resident Evil games out there that have promise, either from a story perspective or because of one or two gameplay gimmicks they had. You know, there is the Outbreak Survivor series, which had multiple characters working together to escape Raccoon City across several scenarios. I think those would be amazing for remakes. There's Code Veronica, my personal least favorite entry in the series because of its awful backtracking and puzzles. But it has a lot of promise. It's very relevant to the story of Resident Evil. And I think remaking it, remastering it in the style of, say, Resident Evil 2 remake would be great. There's my personal favorite game in the series, Resident Evil 0, which really wants a co-op option where two players can control the two characters throughout the training facility and then the final part of the game. I would love that. I would love a Resident Evil 2 remake that allows for two-player co-op. That would be great. And that's just within the Resident Evil series. That's not counting the dozens and dozens of other games out there. In fact, I'm willing to bet if you're old enough or if you've played enough retro games, you're probably already thinking of at least a handful of games that you've tried, you've picked up, and you're thinking, yeah, it wasn't the best, but it had some promise, and taking a new shot at it would probably do good. Right now, I'm playing through Duelists of the Roses, and when I was younger, I thought this game was awesome. I have so many fond memories of this game, and I'm going back to it now as part of my video game backlog cleanup. Now that I'm playing it, there's a lot about this game that has promise, right? But I'm just not having a fun time just because of some mechanics that are they're not polished well enough, I think. The game's kind of janky. The NPCs are kind of weird. The AI makes some interesting choices. It's just not great. It's okay. It's serviceable, but it's not great. And I think a remaster or remake would do good for it. In fact, here's another example. This is Quest 64. It is a fantasy RPG game released for the N64. And it has had an absolutely abysmal reception, critically and from the player perspective. It is not a great game. It's kind of bare bones. It feels unfinished. But what it does have is a very interesting magic system, a wide open world, a huge world for a game on the N64, and a lot of interesting story beats that I think would be served well by a remake, a remaster. Imagine, if you've ever played Quest 64, imagine this game in the style of the Final Fantasy VII remake with the new gameplay mechanics, the updated graphics, and all that jazz. I think it has a lot of promise. And I think there's, just as one example, I think there's dozens, hundreds perhaps, of games from the past that developers have full access to, that they would benefit from going back and seeing what was good about them and improving on the flaws in some way, shape, or form. Nintendo alone, Sony alone, Capcom, etc. They have huge catalogs of games at their disposal that they could be improving on instead of taking just the best entries of their series and rehashing and re-releasing them and taking the safe route. They could be going back to the things that failed in the past and trying again, and maybe, just maybe, saving the reputation of some of these titles and improving upon them, creating games that manage to overcome their bad initial reception. And really, that, at the end of the day, is what I think is what I'm trying to get to here. Is it's easy to take the safe route. It's easy to try what you know will probably work. But I think there is value in trying to take that same quality they put into these remakes of other games, and to take that same quality and apply it to games that didn't have that initial success holding them up. Obviously, I'm going to use this again. Obviously, a Quest 64 remake would be a hard sell to general audiences. They probably won't be chomping at the bit to try Quest 64 again, especially if they've never heard of it or if they have heard of it. But I think going back and applying that same effort, that same quality to games like Quest 64 and plenty of other ones. This is just the first one that came to mind as I was grabbing examples. I think there's value there. I think, especially as we enter an age where re-releasing games is just becoming the norm, going back and trying something that didn't work the first time around might have value to it. But I suppose all I'm doing at this point is repeating myself, so thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Do you agree with me or disagree with me? Either way, I'm thankful to hear you guys comment on the video. I do read every comment. I'm happy for your engagement. So that's all I got. Check out the Patreon. Check out the Discord. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.